This is so hilarious. I saw this on The View the other day, and I just thought to myself, how is this possible? I'll play the clip and let's take it from there.
I mean, I have to say, Karen Dupiche, our wonderful, one of our wonderful makeup artists, when the earthquake was happening, she put her coat on and she was like, Jesus is coming.
I'm out.
I'm out. I'm leaving. We've got a solar eclipse. We've got the earthquake. She ran down the hallway.
The rapture is here.
The rapture's here. And then also I learned that the cicadas are coming.
Cicadas.
Cicadas for the first time in like
No.
100 years.
No.
Two different.
No.
Well, this is what I read.
There's
Two different times.
two different kinds of
Yes,
cicadas.
two different times are coming.
The good cicadas and the bad
So for the first time in many years.
No,
And
every 17 years this happens.
well, that's not what I read, but maybe you know, maybe
Well,
you know better. But
in
I
a
will
way.
say all those things together would maybe lead one to believe that either climate change exists, or something is really going on.
Something's going on, folks.
Climate change.
Climate change exists. The cicadas are coming, or John Cicada's coming. It's bad when Whoopi Goldberg is the voice of reason on The View. It boggles my mind that actually happens. But anyways, I don't mean to disparage Sunny Hostin's opinion. Actually, yes, I do. I do mean to disparage it. That is a wild statement to make, that the return of the cicadas signals climate change, because there was an earthquake in New Jersey, there was a solar eclipse, and the cicadas are coming in August or whenever. Yeah. This is the state of the madness when it comes to climate change. The idea that any type of climate event is this indication of the rapture. It's over. There was flooding. There was this. It's over. Locusts will return. We are descending into madness, and I want to get us out of that descent. But I thought to myself, Christopher, are there examples in Canada of this madness? And yes, there are. Now, not verbatim what Sunny Hostin said, but let's not forget, and I brought this up on a recent video, about what our Supreme Court of Canada did back in 2021. You're reading that right. Oh, let me zoom in. References Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. That's right, folks. Our Supreme Court ruled on the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, otherwise known as the carbon tax. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this in detail because, we'd be here forever. But let me just say this. Wow, there's a lot here. Okay, I will leave a link to this. If you really want to go through it, I will leave a link. So I asked myself, let me go through this decision and see what precisely was happening here. And really what was happening is the Supreme Court of Canada was saying they are justifying that the federal government is within its rights to enact a federal carbon tax. And the rationale provided by the Supreme Court of Canada is the following. There's 5 main reasons. 1, economic incentive to reduce emissions. The decision outlines that the carbon tax creates a direct economic incentive for consumers and producers to choose less carbon-intensive goods and services, because increasing the tax that emit more greenhouse gases, tax increases the cost of goods and services that emit more greenhouse gases, should lead consumers to switch to less harmful alternatives. Should lead. We'll get to that in a second. Second, behavioral change through pricing. The decision argues that by putting a price on carbon, it leverages market mechanisms to enforce behavioral change in both individual and consumer industries. Meaning, guess what? A carbon tax will change your behavior, whether you like to believe that or not. Third, the carbon tax is seen as a driver for innovation and a development of cleaner technologies. Okay. So if we have a carbon tax, guess what? More companies will be innovating and developing cleaner tech, whatever cleaner tech is. Again, we'll unpack. Fourth, uniform national impact. By implementing a nationwide carbon tax, the federal government ensures that the effort to reduce emissions is uniformly applied across all provinces and territories. Interesting, because a nationwide carbon tax would be very different in provinces that don't emit as much carbon as other provinces, but we'll get to that again. And then finally, the fifth, international commitments. The decision notes that implementing a carbon tax is part of Canada's strategy to meet international obligations under agreements such as the Paris Agreement, where reducing emissions is crucial to the global efforts to limit temperature increases. Okay, now here's a question. Does that not sound very political in nature? It almost sounds like a political party. Which political party? Well, you know what I did? I found the Liberal Party's plan for Forward, which is called the Plan Forward. Let me see if I can get that up for you. This is interesting. So what I did, because I'm so fascinated that the Supreme Court, for some reason, got super political about climate change. So what I did is I found, and I can probably get this up for you. Give me a sec here, folks. Plan Forward share. There we go. Okay, this is it. It's called Forward for Everyone. And it's the Liberal plan, our plan form at a glance. You know, you can go through this. But if you scroll down, a cleaner, greener future. So what I did, as I said in ChatGPT, my new best friend, I said, can you analyze the platform Forward for Everyone that the Liberals put out? And then can you also compare this to the Supreme Court's decision and note any similarities between what the Supreme Court decided and what the Liberal Party's platform of 2021 was? And guess what? Guess what ChatGPT found? It found similarities. It found three main similarities. The Supreme Court decision emphasizes the national concern and the federal government's responsibility in addressing climate change mechanisms through mechanisms like carbon pricing. Similarly, the Liberal platform discusses federal actions like climate on national scale issues, emphasizing the government's role in leading initiatives like net zero emissions and pollution pricing. Right, that goes without saying. Second, both documents underscore a commitment to public welfare and safety. That's right, folks. The carbon tax is here to protect your safety and the public welfare. The Supreme Court decision validates the carbon tax as a measure to protect the environment and public health, aligning with the Liberal platform's emphasis on health and safety in policies such as COVID-19 management and long-term care improvements. Haha. Third, interesting about number 2, right? Third, the court's decision navigates the balance between federal and provincial powers in setting a national standard for carbon pricing. This mirrors the Liberal platform's approach to implementing a national program like childcare and healthcare, while considering provincial roles and differences, ensuring a unified but flexible approach to national challenges. Very, very interesting. So, folks, we have the Supreme Court decision that comes very close in mirroring what the Liberal platform of 2021 is. Now, you might be asking yourself, Christopher, but this can't be it. This can't be true. It is true. It is actually very true. In a decision by the Supreme Court of Canada, they ruled that the carbon tax is totally fine. Governments can do this. And they cite things like public health. Now, here's a question for you. One of the things that the Supreme Court of Canada, in its infinite wisdom, shared, and let me just scroll down to this analysis as well. They said, scroll down to the wrong article. I've been doing so much analysis this morning, folks. As the Supreme Court said, there's the economic incentive to reduce emissions. Now, you know what jurisdiction actually has had a carbon tax for the longest time, or a price on pollution for the longest time? Alberta. Alberta's had a carbon price or a carbon tax since 2003. 2003. It's had about 20 years, over 20 years experience with a carbon tax. Now, the Supreme Court of Canada, much like the Liberal Party of Canada, says that if a carbon tax is in place, guess what? You're going to make better choices. businesses are going to make better choices, and that's going to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. That's going to reduce your carbon footprint. So let's go to the jurisdiction with perhaps the longest history with a carbon tax. That's right. That is Alberta. Here's our national greenhouse gas emissions as a country. We're actually not doing too bad, eh? Let's go region. Greenhouse gas emissions by province and territory. Boom. 1990, Alberta was over 100. Can I zoom in here? I'm sorry, folks. I know you're probably watching this on TV. Greenhouse gas emissions by province and territory. 1990, 2005, and 2021. Alberta, 1990, pretty high. 2005, 2 years after its carbon tax, very high. 2021, nearly 20 years after its carbon tax, guess what? Its greenhouse gas emissions have gone up substantially. And this is during COVID. BC as well has a carbon tax, I believe. Now, I don't think they have as much experience as many years as Alberta. I could be wrong on that. Someone please Google that. Ontario's come down primarily because of our closure of coal. I don't think Ontario needs coal, to be honest. We've got a lot of hydro out here. But clearly we see Alberta, the jurisdiction with the longest period of time with a carbon tax, has increased their carbon footprint. Now, I know what some of you might be saying, Christopher, this is flippant. It's flippant because Alberta has oil and gas that dwarfs any other province, and the demand for oil and gas will continue to rise. Oh, ho, ho, yes. That's the conclusion that a lot of people don't want to hear. That is real. Our demand for oil and gas will continue to go up year after year after year after year. Why? Because fossil fuels still provide the most reliable energy to the most amount of people. That's just the reality of it. Our cities, our civilizations demand energy, and we need inexpensive, reliable energy. And guess what? Oil and gas is the bloodline. Is that the right word? Is the backbone. There we go. Better word. Of our economies. We need oil and gas. And this is not me. I'm not part of the oil and gas conglomerate. I wish someone would fund this podcast, but no, I am not being paid. I am just trying to shed some light on the madness that's happening with our Supreme Court of Canada and its justification. So remember, the Supreme Court said a carbon tax creates a direct incentive for consumers and producers to choose less carbon intensive goods and services. We haven't seen that in Alberta. It said that the decision argues that putting a price on carbon will leverage market mechanisms to enforce behavioral changes. We haven't seen that in Alberta. It promotes innovation in green technologies. We actually have seen a bit of that, but I'll get to that in a second. And then there's a uniform national impact and then international commitment. So what I did, because I'm so committed to this issue, folks, I am committed for us to get to the bottom of this because it needs to be gotten to the bottom of, damn it. I said to myself, let me find some research on carbon pricing emissions. And you know what I found? Here's what I found. This really interesting article, and I'll zoom in again because it doesn't really come up well for you, by Jessica Green in Environmental Research Letters. This is in 2021. Does carbon pricing reduce emissions? A review of ex post analysis. Now, I'm going to save you a lot of time. Again, I will link this somewhere below in the show notes, so do not fear. Jessica's research goes into a lot of detail, as you can see. Guess what the conclusions are. This is hilarious. Again, I could just go here. So if you go through Jessica's research, you find this piece. The IPCC has indicated the urgent need for more ambitious reduction goals, and the pledge under the Paris Agreement are nowhere sufficient to limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And there are reasons to believe that the rate of climate change will continue to accelerate. At best, carbon pricing has produced incremental reductions. Interesting. If it is to be used as a tool for mitigation, it should be only used in tandem with other, more aggressive policies. More aggressive, folks. More aggressive. It's not enough that we have a price on pollution, folks. It's not enough. This is why I cannot understand climate change public policy experts. I can't. For the life of me, what they are arguing, if we boil it down to its core, climate change policymakers are arguing for more regulation, more taxation, more. And if we don't see a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions as a result of the initial carbon tax, it's because we weren't taxing enough. There's not enough of a suite of different policies and programs that the governments offer. There's not enough innovation. So how do we remedy that? Spend more. Spend more on climate change. Spend more on greenhouse gas reduction. Then we're going to see a change. When are we going to see that? Well, it's going to take years, Christopher. It's going to take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Why don't we increase the carbon tax to 10%, to 20%, to 30%? Guess what? No matter how much Canada increases its carbon tax, we are a drop in the bucket on global greenhouse gas emissions. I think Canada's around 1% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. And guess what? You would have paid so much out of your paychecks every other week towards climate initiatives that go nowhere. Nowhere. There's nothing in a carbon tax that shows that our greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced. Alberta is the best example, and I'm sure there are others. There's not enough evidence to support the Supreme Court of Canada's decision on climate change. There's not enough relevant data to support that decision, and yet the Supreme Court of Canada ruled and turned into a policymaker and turned into a political policymaker on this issue. And that's why we as Canadians have to really stand up, not only against the carbon tax, because that is what it is. It's ridiculous. But we have to stand against this absolute madness that's happening in our discourse, in our public policy professionals, in our Supreme Courts that are ruling very politically on these issues. I would have expected our Supreme Court to say, you know what? We don't know enough. The research is not fully there. We're not going to stand in the way of the federal government wanting to do a carbon tax. That's up to them to figure out with the provinces, and also to take a poll of Canadians. Do your public engagement. If you want to do that, go for it. But we're not here to rule in favor or against a carbon tax. Our role in the Supreme Court of Canada is to be the place of not only sober second thought, but to be the place where we're really delving into the weeds of what this is. And the fact that I, sitting here with you for the past 20 minutes, showed just a brief analysis of how the carbon tax makes no sense, the fact that the Supreme Court of Canada didn't even do that, and those judges are getting paid a lot of money, tenured, groceries taken care of, housing, I believe, taken care of, that they didn't do that lets me think something really political, deep state-ish is happening here in Canada. Let me know what you think. Am I going wild? Am I going crazy? Am I going off my rocker? Let me know what you think. Comment section below. Christopher Balkrin, this is Open Minds.